The rapid AI infrastructure build-out across the country is pushing power bills up for some Americans, and some states are fed up with that. Florida lawmakers are saying, hold on, not so fast. If big tech wants giant data centers, residents shouldn't have to bankroll them through higher electric bills. So Governor DeSantis is preparing to sign a bill that would block utility companies from raising rates for customers due to AI-driven power costs. Now, this is a debate that we've had before at this table, that some technology companies, Taylor, are already doing this in practice because they get it and they don't want to have backlash as a result of it. But there is no legislation about it, and you do worry what happens as we move forward, as energy usage dramatically increases. It might be easier to contain it now. So it looks like Ron DeSantis is trying to do something about that.
And I like this, and I'm never a fan of more laws. I'll never forget when I was watching something with my dad. This was 20 years ago, and whoever was talking up on stage, I don't know if it was Congress or president, said, here's all of my accomplishments. I signed in X amount of new laws. And my dad says, signing new bills and more government is never a sign of success. I agree with that in this instance, except that I'm not going to take these companies' words for it. So I'm glad that it's law, even though it means that we have a new law and more government involved. I also think that this helps with the sentiment around AI. AI's coming for our jobs. AI's raising power costs. Even if that's not the case, this helps prevent some of the AI backlash that I think the next generation of leaders are going to start to have when they go up for election or re-election. And those local rooms are going to have those town halls. People are angry, and this will help be able to say that's not the case, and here's why.
Yeah. So many reasons to move to Florida, and that's why many New Yorkers did, Liz. I know you spend a lot of time there. But DeSantis seems very reasonable and forward-thinking, and you can just imagine what might happen in a blue state like New York with data centers, energy usage. They're very quick to come after us, the taxpayer, but I don't know how quick they would be to pass legislation for something that was hurting people.
It's surprising, isn't it, to see Florida in the vanguard here? Because you would think New York would be way out there, particularly because then they can blame tech and the data centers for what is policy-driven increases in electricity costs in New York, about 50% more than the national average, which is not the case in Florida. Interestingly, there's a governor's race underway in Florida, campaigns are beginning to align, and AI and the data centers is a big issue. People going after Byron Daniels, who I think is the front runner, saying, oh, he's all in the pocket of tech, he's promoting AI, et cetera. So I don't know whether Governor DeSantis, who everybody in Florida thinks has been a fantastic governor, is trying to ward off, to your point, criticism of the AI boom, of the spending on these data centers and so forth. So maybe this is a way of just sort of calming the whole issue and not making this a Republican versus Democrat issue, which I think is actually pretty brilliant in terms of strategy. It's possible.
So if David Sachs was here, though, right now at this table, I don't think he'd like this proposal, would he? I haven't read up on what he thinks about DeSantis doing this, but I do know that he has been very much on the train of we've got to have a streamlined process for AI build-out, data center build-out in America.
You mean a federal?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this, I actually like the federalist approach to this because I think we have problems to solve that we don't know the answers to. But this really runs counter to the Trump administration agenda of let's have a national policy, don't let states get in the way. How can we have 50 different fiefdoms on data center regulation?
But this is just as it relates to raising costs on you, the people.
Yeah, but that's like essentially saying the same thing. If you create a radically different policy for energy costs, and I support that. Look, I actually like what DeSantis is doing here, but I'm just saying when you do that, what you've essentially done is said we're going to have 50 different policies for AI regulation. And so if you're like an AI maximalist, like it has to happen now, data centers have to happen now, this is going to slow that down.
I hear you, and that's a valid point. At the same time, it takes so long to pass federal legislation, and there's so much argument around how we should be proceeding with AI that I feel like DeSantis is just saying, I need to protect my constituents, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it now, Jerry.
Well, I think we need a broader conversation about these data centers. They're using already 4 to 6% of all of our electricity in this country. They're taking up prime real estate. You talk about New York State, the place they've really gone into is Virginia. You cannot drive through any part of Virginia and not see a data center. And I think there are real issues about not in my backyard, energy consumption. What does it mean? You know, like these buildings are virtually empty. There are not people working. You think there are people working in them. That's not what they're about. So they're just these big, empty, vast spaces that pop up across the landscape. So I think it makes sense to have a national conversation about it. I'm not surprised that the governor of Florida gets in front of it, though.
You know how we solve that? Data centers in space.
Yeah, it's true.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
The moon's backyard.
So of that
We'll figure it
4%, though, I wonder how much the industry itself is creating. I mean, after all, people building data centers oftentimes are building power plants to supply the power for those data centers, or they're restarting nuclear power plants. I could not believe that a group went and restarted 3 Mile Island, which not that long ago was like this toxic name and actually toxic site. That everybody hated and thought incredibly unsafe, but it was okay as long as it went to data center usage. So I do think there's some incremental energy being produced specifically for these centers.
Absolutely.
Microsoft has been one of those that said we will not give, we won't take, we will be a net giver in terms of water use and giving back to the plant.
If you want to look at glass half full on this, I'm just thinking about your point on the federal approach to standardizing it. Maybe DeSantis is paving the way. I mean, if you were Blue State, if you were Kathy Hochul, would you want people, on top of everything that they're feeling right now, to feel like you're not protecting their energy needs against big bad tech?
Well, I think the virtue of having states do policy is they're laboratories for experimentation. If that's a great policy in Florida and other states see it, they could adopt it. So I agree with you on that. But look, just even within conservatives, there's sort of two wings on this. There's the wing, the kind of the new tech conservative wing that says, we got to run faster than anybody else in AI. Right. So you can't be a NIMBY. You can't have a not in my backyard. You got to pay the price. This is national defense. You have another side of the conservative wing that says, whoa, 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 don't cram all this federal stuff down my throat and make me pay more for your nebulous idea of what we need in our economy in the future. And those two wings are coming up real close. When Florida is the state doing this, those two wings are coming up real close to each other. And I don't think we've sorted that one out yet. And I think there's going to be a pretty big national, you call it conversation, but a pretty big national fight about how we navigate that. And I don't think we have the answer to it yet.
I think you're right.